do certain regions have a more or less need to connect to the United States over other parts of the world? So let's look first at Europe and Asia to get started with. So these two regions, you can see they have had a fairly slow, steady decline in terms of the share of their bandwidth that connects to the United States. In the case of Asia, you can see there it's just below 40% now, and Europe is about at 20%. These regions both have very strong growth intra-regionally. So the bandwidth among Asian countries, within European countries, has been growing very rapidly. But also the Europe to Asia route has been growing rapidly in recent years. That does help to reduce some of the connectivity happening to the United States. The next two regions let's look at are Africa and the Middle East. And here you see a really very clear trend. The US is not really that important for Africa or the Middle East right now in terms of having direct links. This happened years ago, though. You can see in 2010 or so, it went to almost zero. There's very little need for these two regions to connect to the US. Now, why is that? It's just more affordable and cheaper and lower latency to connect to Europe than to go to the United States. So that's why you see most of the bandwidth from Africa and the Middle East inter-regionally is going to Europe, not to the US anymore. The last two regions are also kind of interesting. Let's look at Oceania and Latin America. So Latin America, almost all of the interregional bandwidth for Latin America is linked to the United States. The other share is within the countries in the region, it's intra-regional. For Oceania, that's when we've seen some big changes over the last 10 years. Part of that is due to increasing intra-oceanic bandwidth between Australia and New Zealand, but also the number of new cables linking Oceania to Asia. So that's risen as a share of the overall capacity for Oceania. Let's look also at a different way now, besides regions. Let's look at the type of company. And this chart here is showing a comparison between content cloud CDN operators as one category here in the turquoise color versus red, which is everybody else, the carriers, research networks, enterprises, right? So you can see here that there is a bit more US centricity for the content cloud CDN companies than there is for other operators. That kind of makes sense. You know, if you're a carrier, you can connect, you know, to a CDN, a cloud operator in your own region. You don't need to go to the US directly to have connectivity in many cases.